بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجه وعلى أهل بيتي الطيبين الطاهرين ولعنة الله على أعدائهم إلى قيام يوم الدين. Welcome to Journey to the Hereafter. We're going over Surah Waqia. Today we have verses 50 to 56 to go over. Lesson 11. When we talked about the three groups, we talked about the closest, Sabiqun, the foremost. We talked about those that are Ashabul Yamin, or Maymana. Those are the companions of the right. They'll get their deeds from the right hand, or they'll have a good fortune. Or we talked about Mash'ama or Shimal, those that get their actions from the left. So these three categories, and we're going over the description of each one. We already went the description of what happens to the first group, the Sabiqun, and now we went over the description of those of the good fortune. Now these last verses are the last description of, God forbid, may Allah save us from being Ashab al-Shimal. Sometimes you read these verses and you think that that's not me, that cannot be me, that's somebody else. But it's interesting that Allah has put this in the Quran for the readers of Quran, reciters of Quran to read. And I said it over and over again, that there are tafsirs that in the Day of Judgment we go through hell. Not necessarily that Sirat goes over, but that actually we go through hell, but we go in the bridge so fast that nothing happens, inshallah. So this is something that we will enter. Hopefully, nothing will happen to us on the Day of Judgment. And this is a threat for us. A lot of times we see people that, it's my life story. You've seen so many people come into the faith of Islam, become religious, and God forbid, their faith becomes weaker, their actions become weaker, and they drift off. So there's no guarantee that these verses of heaven only apply to us. God forbid these verses of hell can apply to us. And that factor of instilling fear in us and instilling caution in us is something that really makes us keep staying good. A group of students came to Ayatul Bahjat, they asked him for some advice, and Ayatul Bahjat said to them that you are good now, stay good. Staying good is the biggest challenge that we have, is staying on the path. So these verses can refer to anyone. And when you go time and time again, look at history, you see some of the companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam that said they loved him, but one of them at the end was the killer of Imam Ali, Ibn Muljam, someone who said he loved Imam Ali. Or you see some of his companions like Shimr, who fought alongside Imam Ali, for example, in battle, killing Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So it's very possible that someone can change. Very possible that, because guidance is up to God. We always think it's up to us and the decision we make. True, that's one part of it. But the guidance itself, if you want to say whose action it is God, according to the Quran. God determines who deserves it, who doesn't deserve it, who should not be guided anymore, or whatever, based on their actions. But it's up to God. And the Quran mentions that there's the opening or expanding of the chest. When this happens, everything is logical, everything is good, our actions are good. But God forbid, if we become bad, then God closes this chest to Islam. We start ridiculing, making fun. Sometimes we ask these questions, like, look at these people that they're questioning the hereafter. How dare they? But actually, God forbid, if this chest closes, we could be of those that are making fun of the Day of Judgment. Making fun of, oh, you still believe in heaven and hell? For example, God forbid. So this is one of the answers that the Prophet is instructed to give them, the deniers of the resurrection, in verse 49. قُلْ إِنَّ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَالْآخِرِينَ. Say, O Muhammad, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Indeed, the former and the later peoples, إِنَّ الْأَوَّلِينَ وَالْآخِرِينَ لَمَّجْمُوعُونَ إِلَى مِيقَاتِ يَوْمٍ مَعْلُومٍ. They are to be gathered together for the appointment of a known day. So tell them that everyone from the beginning and the end, there's no doubt about it, they'll be gathered in a appointed day. So that is, the Day of Judgment is one of the facts that sometimes we overlook, is that everyone from Awwaleen and Akhirin, imagine how many people we have right now. Like 7 billion, 8 billion, 6 billion, billions of people all come together. How much of a crowd would that be? We can't imagine. Now imagine everyone ever created from the beginning of time, every human ever created, and everyone's there, billions of and whoever in the future, obviously, too. So there's going to be this massive gathering, all on the Day of Judgment. Let's go to the next slide. ثم إنكم أيها الضالون المكذبون. Then indeed you, O those astray who are deniers. Now again, this is to those that are led astray, those that are deniers, those that went off. Adal is someone that goes to, is misguided. They go to, a different path. They will be led to al-mukaththibun, those that deny. لَآكِلُونَ مِنْ شَجَرٍ مِنْ زَقُومٍ. Their food they'll be eating from the trees of Zaqum. Zaqum is, there is something that, their bellies. This is a continuation of the Prophet's speech in the previous verse. In it, he informs the idolaters that will become of them on the day of resurrection. The food. Now we're going to talk about the food and drink. Because we talked a bit about the food and drink of heaven. Now let's talk a bit about the food and drink of hell. He informs the idolaters what will become of them on the day of resurrection, the food and drink that they experience. By addressing them as astray deniers, this highlights the traits that they have rendered them the people of misery. Why were they? Remember last time we talked about 3 traits. This is also other traits. They were misguided. They were led astray. They weren't on Sirat al-Mustaqim. They weren't on the right path. And they were deniers. So this is what caused them to be those that will be eating from the tree of Zaqum. It also shows that these traits have become a part of their character because of their continuous and obstinate denial of the truth. That when a person becomes adal, when a person becomes al-mukaththab, because they kept denying it, this is part of their character. It is part of their character to deny the truth. So if they were merely stray without having also denied the truth, then there would be hope that they might be guided and saved rather than perish. So these are people that there's no chance in them, there's no hope in them. Being misguided and rejecting the truth, it's just part of who they are now. Because if there was a chance, then there would be hope. But it wouldn't be, you could say these words, adal and mukaththab, are those that persistently are denying. Note that the preposition min in min zaqum explains it's bayyina, meaning that la'akiluna min shajar, they'll be eating what? From the tree of zaqum. It explains the species of the tree, or it shows us the extension of min shajara. The pronoun in it stuffs your bellies with, it refers to either the trees or its fruits. So this is either the tree of Zaqum or the fruit of Zaqum. لَآكَلُونَ مِنْ شَجَرٍ مِنْ زَقُومٍ. The word tree, shajar, and fruit. The word tree and fruit here can either be masculine or feminine, hence its pronoun, it is, feminine. Zaqum is a type of tree that springs out of the bottom of hell, or mentioned as a cursed tree. In another verse of the Quran say that the heads, the zaqum, are fruits of it are shaped like devils. So some in this world, for example in Jordan or Turkey or other places, they have these words for zaqum. For example, it could be like a poisonous tree or something like that. But that's not necessarily the zaqum that's in the Quran. It's going to be something completely different. So it is a tree that springs out the bottom of the hell, and you're going to, multiple times it's mentioned in the Quran. So surely the tree of zaqum in other parts of the Quran is the food of the sinful, like dregs of oil, it shall boil in their bellies. That's one of the characteristics, that when they eat it, it boils in their bellies, like the boiling of hot water. فَشَارَبُونَ عَلَيْهِ مِنَ الْحَمِيمِ, and drinking on top of it from scalding water. So when a person is burning, they want water, but the water will be scalding, the water will be boiling. فَشَارَبُونَ شُرْبَ الْحِيمِ, and will drink as the drinking of thirsty camels. Camels, as you know, they store their water for days, and they can drink, gallons and gallons of water. So they will be so thirsty that they come and they drink like gallons of water like camels, but it will be a drink of, scalding water. So on top of it indicates that they drink of the boiling water immediately after from the zaqum. And you see that this is, this causes the camel drink water until it dies or becomes gravely ill. Some have said that, it denotes a patch of dry ground that absorbs water and is never filled. So, therefore, the meaning of the verse is, then after the eating of the zaqum, they will drink extremely hot water. In spite of its heat, they will drink it without being quenched. Let's go to the next verse in Surah Al-Waqia. At the end, this is the last verse about the dwellers of hell. هَذَا نُزُلُهُمْ يَوْمَ الدِّينِ, that is their accommodation on the day of recompense. So nuzuluhum means to receive, it's their hospitality. That's what they're going to receive. In other words, the day of recompense is the food and drink that will be offered to God's guests out of hospitality. So, therefore, the meaning of the verse is the food and drink described here is the hospitality that the stray deniers will receive. Calling it hospitality, nuzul, is a form of mockery, Allah Ta'ala says, and this verse is addressed to the Prophet. Now, so the Prophet can say this, to them. Now, where the part of the Prophet's speech to the idolaters, it would say such will be the hospitality you receive. هَذَا نُزُلُهُمْ يَوْمَ الدِّينِ. So when you look at these verses, and a question comes to mind, is that, well, the person will be in this forever. God forbid. And a question that happens in our minds is that, well, we lived a life that is 50, 60, 70, 100 years of life in this world. Okay, they became mukadhab, they became dhal, for example. They denied, they became astray. But why did they get eternal punishment for something that, was so short? And one of the answers to this is that the effects of what we do goes to the spirit. And since the spirit is eternal, therefore the effect is eternal. So whatever we do today, whatever sin, God forbid, we do, or if we deny, you're affecting the spirit. And is the spirit true? If you do something to the body today, it will last until you're alive in this world, because the body, when it decays, there's no need for it anymore, for example. So it doesn't matter what you do to the body. It'll just be in this world. But if you harm the spirit, you'll be harming yourself for eternity. And therefore, we always say that spiritual harm is much worse than physical harm. Because the body is temporary, will decay no matter what. But the spirit, once created, is always alive, is always high, it's always alive. So if you affect the spirit and damage it and harm it, then the recompense is going to be everlasting. The effect of it is going to be everlasting. So that's the first thing. Because these punishments they're referring to the spirit. And once the spirit gets harmed, the spirit lasts forever, it will always be harmed. 2, there are people that will be forgiven, obviously. And when we read these verses, it's not like, all these people are going to be, there's going to be so much forgiveness that even Shaitan will ask for forgiveness, on the day of judgment. Well, tempted, he won't ask for forgiveness, he'll be tempted to. Because he's like, this person's forgiven, that person's forgiven. So many people won't reach this part of hell. Or some might even be in hell temporarily and then come out. Right? But the dwellers forever of hell are truly those that fought against the prophets, fought against the imams. And all they had was nothing but evil, absolute evil. When you look at the prophets' lives and you look at the successors, the imams' lives, you see that they are the best sign of God. Therefore, fighting against them, especially during the time of the prophets, during the time of the imams, means that you're fighting against God. So when you see the akhlaq, for example, of the prophet, when you see the miracles of the prophet, when you see the miracle of the Quran, when you see the spirituality of the prophet, the forgiveness of the prophet, and still you choose the trustworthiness of the prophet, and still you choose to fight against him, it means that you're just fighting against all of good. It means that you're purely evil. It's different than when a person today never saw the prophets, never saw the imams, and just heard things and is against, for example, Islam. Many of these people that are actually against Islam, later on they research, some of them become Muslim. It's different than when you stand up against Rasulullah and you want to fight against Rasulullah that you've seen with your own eyes. The third thing, so therefore there will be forgiveness. The third thing I want to say is this, is that when a person lives a life, as we said in this verse, a point to know is that when you're dal and mukadhab and that becomes part of your attributes, someone's attributes, it means that if they lived 100 years more, they would still live the same way. If they lived 1,000,000 years more, they would still live the same way. If they were living eternally in this world, they would still live the same way. So it's such attributes that become to a person inseparable from a person. Even though it took place 100 years, because it becomes part of that person, and those people that deserve, that punishment, they have acquired that attribute after, so many years. And there's no way that there's any chance of, forgiveness, or there's always a chance of forgiveness from Allah, but there's no chance of repentance or for them asking forgiveness. So it doesn't matter if they're here for 50 years, 20 years, they showed to God, they showed to themselves that this is how, they're going to live life. So again, a lot of this you can just look at as cause and effect, that this is what they're doing to their own spirits. And that's why when you look at some of the du'as, it says, ظَلَمْتُ نَفْسِي, I have oppressed myself. Because nothing happens to God. They can't harm God. And all those that are doing this and sinning and harming and going into corruption, all they're doing is harming themselves. And Allah wants us not to harm ourselves. So He makes these things haram for us so we don't harm ourselves. But this is something that they have brought to themselves. So that's why the tafsir of khawf, it says, don't be afraid of God, be afraid of your own actions. We're not afraid of God. Some people think that when God is watching you, it's like, a police officer watching you to, get you, or to get you a citation, or for you to get arrested or something. The way that God watches us, as one of our scholars says, is like a father looks at their kids, or a mother looks at their kids, or their loving parent. That's the way that when God sees us, He's watching us this way. So when we read these verses, it's not that we are afraid of God, and God is, God forbid, a being that's just going to punish us. We're actually, this is that you see, the illustrations and stuff that you can see here. That's nothing but our own actions and what we did to ourselves. That's just cause and effect. Just like, for example, if I take a pen and I stick it in my eye, and I injure my eye, and I can't see anymore. That action, took 1 second. 1 second. But it caused eternity of blindness. I can never see again. That's just how this world works. That is just cause and effect. That's causality. In the same way, if we can't really give an example, but if I harm my spirit with that knife or whatever of sin, it would have that until I truly seek forgiveness for eternity. So that is the way you look at it, as cause and effect, you can say. There's one way to look at it. And when you talk about khawf and fear of this, we're actually afraid of ourselves. We're afraid of what we can do to ourselves. And that's why in the du'as I also mentioned, ظَلَمْتُ nafsi, I've done dhulm to myself. Dua Kumail, I believe. I've oppressed myself. May Allah inshallah make us of those that are protected from the hellfire. May Allah make us of those that truly recite these verses and believe in them. And this instills in us that caution that we need to have from ourselves. May we inshallah live a life that we always believe that God is watching us, and that God is caring for us, and that we are never left alone by ourselves. Inshallah, may Allah expedite the return of the Imam of the age. Thank you for joining us. See you next week, inshallah. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajjan faraj.
الرحمن الرحيم
إذا وقعت الواقعة ليس لوقعتها كاذبة خافضة